Hi there and welcome. Today we have a fascinating, exciting, and delicious conversation for you. We have here Krista Marie Melanson, who is the relationship chef. So Krista is not only a Cordon Bleu-trained chef, she's also a certified relationship coach who works with committed couples to grow and expand their connection. And in this conversation, we talk about how to bring food and cooking and appreciation of food and teamwork into a relationship, how to nourish a bit of intentional time in our couples or families to learn more about delicious food, how to bake, how to cook, and how to enjoy not only the taste buds, but how to lay out a beautiful feast and bring in wonderful memories for ourselves. So without any further ado, let's jump in and dive into a very delicious conversation.
But before we get into our delicious conversation, I just want to remind you about our Patreon account where you can find us at Into Your Life. This is that place where you will find those gold nuggets. And if you're a regular listener to us, you know that we have some amazing gold nuggets. Well, this is where you can now find these gold nuggets, plus some really great advice from our guests, new and old episodes as well, because there's some brilliant advice there. But of course, Lenka and I are really passionate about building this community and sharing. So again, this will be a space where you can connect with us, you can communicate with us, and we will be having some bonus content as we grow the community. And by having you there, it just makes it more special. So come and find us on Into Your Life on Patreon. But now let's carry on with our conversation.
Today, we have a wonderful guest here with us. We have Krista, who is the relationship chef. And it's so interesting, just the title, relationship chef. So I can't wait to hear more. Welcome, Krista. Tell us a little bit more about you and who you are, what you do, and what the relationship chef actually means.
Well, it's great to meet you both. Thank you so much for having me on your show. Um, I am the relationship chef. I'm a Cordon Bleu-trained chef, and cooking has been my passion through my entire life. As far back as I can remember, I was always a foodie. And I was cooking in the kitchen for so many years, and then I decided to start a family, so I stepped away from cooking because it's a lot to be pregnant in a kitchen with everything that's going on and the heat. So I started down another path and really embraced the relationship side of it when COVID hit and I wanted to stay at home. And I knew a lot of people were struggling with this type of thing. So I really started working on helping people connect and helping people improve their relationships and find love in their lives. And a little while ago, I thought, there's something missing in what I'm doing. Love is very much a passion of mine because I have an amazing relationship and I want everybody to have the same amazing relationship. But there was just a little something missing in my business. And then, it's like, it's the food. I need to bring my cooking into it. And so the relationship chef was born. And it's just, there's so many ways for people to connect. And a lot of time, they will try and do it through therapy or whatever, which works for some people, but it doesn't work for everyone. And I believe in my very deepest of hearts that connecting with somebody through actions, through doing something together, is a great way to connect. And food is such a love language, right? With all the senses, the taste, the smell, everything. And then when you connect through food, you have the opportunity to work together as a team and be at ease while you are creating something beautiful. So it just, as soon as I thought of it, I'm like, these are great together. And this is what I really want to bring to the world.
It makes total sense to me. And especially, yeah, thinking back to pandemic, I think a lot of us, we have realized that, just living together does not mean spending more time together, being next to each other all the time does not mean that we will have a good relationship. It often means the opposite, that we just take each other for granted and we
Exactly.
just don't do anything unusual. We don't intentionally spend time together. And the same with food, like we are taking restaurants, cooking classes, takeaway, all those things pretty much for granted. And we often don't even think like how much comes in the food, what is on our plate, what we're eating. So mashing it all together and not only bringing people closer. And as you said, I think therapy is a wonderful thing, but maybe not everyone has to start there. This sounds like a very gentle way of starting prioritizing your relationship, start looking at, improving things here and there. And if at the same time we can improve our nutrition and we can learn some cool recipes and we can really work on our teamwork, that sounds like a perfect combination. So I want to know more about.
I love it.
No, we're definitely big foodies here. So you're in the right company, both of us in relationships. So we kind of understand how the dynamics work and how, sometimes people have different preferences in their foods, and it might be nice to experiment and kind of lean on each other for a little bit, and how it really can tell us a lot about relationship. And I would love to know how then, from maybe working with people on the cooking, on the food, on discovering their relationship through food, what are the things that people can actually learn about each other? I already touched on maybe the teamwork, but I'm sure there are so many more layers that this combination of relationships and food can really teach us about not only the relationship, but also often ourselves.
Definitely. I mean, when you step into the kitchen to cook with someone, and I'll use myself as an example, right? I'm a trained chef. I didn't play well with others in the kitchen. And it took a little bit of practice for me to learn to accept my partner in the kitchen with me. And we have a wonderful time cooking together. Our joke is that, he really does secretly know how to cook, because I still do all the cooking or most of it. But when we're in the kitchen together, like you said, it's teamwork, but it's also, he'll come up with something and he'll say, well, I usually do this like this. And I go, I never thought of doing it like that, but that's a great idea. So you can learn from each other, and you may be surprised at the skills that one another have. And I like to encourage people to have conversations about food and about family traditions. What was your tradition? Because you assume that partners know this about each other, but you don't always, unless you dive in and choose to make these conversations. Have you ever lied about having an allergy because there was something you didn't want to eat? Little fun things like that. And with the interaction, you learn to interact more easily because you have a conversation starter in what you're doing, working together as a task. But it's a low pressure situation, right? You're making dinner, but the world doesn't hinge on your dinner. And sometimes you learn that the mistakes that you make in the kitchen are the most memorable and the most fun, right? And a great new recipe can come out of it. But I also encourage my clients to experiment a little bit. That's one whole module of my program, is experimenting and, taking ingredients and making something without a recipe. And that's way out of the comfort zone for some people in terms of cooking. I spoke to somebody the other day and he said, I have to diligently follow every step of the recipe. And I encourage people to try and bring a little creativity, only what they're comfortable with, but you can get more comfortable brainstorming and being creative and creating something that you've never done before. And whether it's a success or a failure, it's often memorable either way.
I love how you embracing food, because when you talk about food and relationships, the first thing I think about is the Italians. And there's like big Italian mamas, with the pasta sauce and the tomato sauce and Mamma Mia and all this, and almost opera singing, and just the exuberance of the Italians. And it is very much it is about food. It is about bringing the family together and having those meals and bringing the kids in and cooking with them and then sitting at a table. And it's all around food and the enjoyment of it and the sharing. So I can really picture how you being a chef has brought this in, because food is something so special. Yes, we can just stand at the sink and shove a piece of toast in our mouth or grab a takeaway, but when it's actually created from scratch and is part of a dinner and part of a routine, it has something so special to it. It brings that element to it that you don't necessarily get in any other way, especially from scratch. You know, you like you said, you can share the chores. So my husband doesn't cry when he slices onions. So guess who's the onion chopper in this house?
Right.
It's not me. And the thing is, and then it's like, okay, so how do you want them? Do you want them sliced? Do you want them chopped? You know, I want them in fine pieces. And bless his cotton socks, he doesn't always get it right. Or maybe I'm just too much of a control freak in the kitchen. But the thing is, it just then I can bring him in to helping with the meal, even if it is just doing something that makes me cry
Right.
with the onions. But it is, when you talk about food and just bringing it in, we can look at how they used to be in the olden days, or especially the Mediterranean countries, how it's such a big food is family. It's like one thing. It's not a separate entity. And it's like, you're too skinny, we need to make food for you. And it's not just, here, have a slice of bread with jam on it. It's like a whole meal, because it's not just about feeding somebody. It really is about that process, almost feeding the soul as well as the body. And I love how you've brought this in, and being a chef and helping people to help their relationships, because you can do it with kids, you can do it with grandkids, you can do it with partners, you can do it with friends.
Definitely.
It's not a one size fits all. Just any way can fit. Some people can chop the onions and other people can do something else, but it's bringing people together. And I really love how you've done this. And I'd love it if you could share some of the stories of how you have brought people together. Obviously no names or anything, but just some of the experiences of examples, just for our listeners to get an idea, because I appreciate cooking is not a thing like it used to be. And it might be like, oh, how am I going to start? Now I've got to start cooking. It's another chore that I've got to start doing, and I've got to bring in my partner. So maybe just sharing some of your experiences and stories, so that our listeners can maybe think, oh, hang on a minute. Yes, let me see how I can start to enjoy food again in a way.
Right. Well, and I agree with everything you said. If you think about it, every culture, unless there's some cultures I don't know about, but in every culture that we hear about, food is central in every occasion, right? Weddings, birthdays, anniversaries, graduation, whatever. It centers around a meal. So food is always going to be a huge part of our lives, whether it's only on special occasions or on regular occasions. So, and I have had so many people connect. I had one lady, and she's this amazing, wonderful Tantra expert, and she helps people, you know, in the bedroom and spice things up. And you would think she would have everything going on in her relationship. She's also Italian by heritage, right? So she appreciates the food. And she's worked with me, and she said she and her husband or partner have so much fun in the kitchen, and they just connect, and then they have this incredible meal afterwards. And, you know, creating the meal is so much fun. But then she said sitting afterwards and experiencing the taste and, you know, the pride in this new recipe that they've created. She's just had so much fun doing it. And, you know, I've got other people who say, we didn't know this much about food and creating food. And they've, you know, they learn little tips through the class. And now both of them are saying, well, let's try this and let's go here. And why don't we do this? And it just sort of brings people along to a different place where they feel like they've accomplished something with their partner. And I mean, food is a chore sometimes, right? We make food every day. I make food every day. I don't like making food every day, but I do, because we have to eat, and I'm the chef. So that's just the way it goes. But when I set the intention to make a meal that's going to be special with Billy, my partner, he and I work together in the kitchen, and it's just different, right? There's a touch here, a kiss there, and it's far more intimate than going out for dinner because we're in the privacy of our own home. We're having conversations about anything and everything, and it just brings a different experience to your meal. And obviously you're not going to do that every single day, but once a week or at least once a month, to take cooking and your meal into a date night, but still at home, it's really a powerful thing to connect couples and to make that bond even stronger.
And I think even it's the cooking, it is the preparations, the going shopping, it's the planning, it's imagining what we're gonna cook, it's the envisioning, but then it is the eating part. And I think that sometimes it's so often skipped that even when we cook together with a partner, we then often just put a TV on and have our smartphones in our hands, and even in a restaurant, always taking photos. I know that I work on social media, so I will always have my phone out, take a photo, make sure it's documented for the gram. But at the same time, just making sure that as much as I can, put the phone away and then be there, like look the person in the eyes and actually, have some interesting conversations rather than always be buried in the phone or just mindlessly just shoving the food down our throat.
Definitely. And that's one thing that I do is sort of like a micro lesson that I teach people is to put the phone down. Now I'm a little more, I say, put the effing phone down, but people come home at the end of the day, whether they're working from home or one's out or both's out or whatever, and you've just spent 8 hours together. And the first thing you do is you're on your phone and you don't have the conversation. So I encourage people to put the phone down and say, how was your day? But not just ask that, because we probably all do, but to actually listen and then take it further. How's your day? How is that contract you're working on? How is that guy in the office who keeps giving you a hard time? Specifically take an interest in your partner and do it as you're creating dinner together, whatever it is. But you're right, it's the phone and the social media. The tendency to get on your phone and just drift into your own world does not help connection at all. And I'm working very hard at doing that in my own relationship too, to the point where I make amazing meals and I have no pictures because I forget about it because I'm caught up in the moment with my partner of making the meal and eating the meal. So I think that's probably a better way to do it. I can always have pictures of food, but I think taking the time to connect and focus on your partner and make eye contact is really important for a relationship.
And as Lenka mentioned earlier, it's not just the cooking, but it's going right to the beginning. It can even be sitting and watching a cooking show or getting out a recipe book or going on YouTube and looking at some recipes and saying, oh, should we try this? Or what about this? And so it can be really right in the beginning, and then maybe going shopping together, going to the farmer's market or finding where you can get the best ingredients. Because if you're really going to put this effort in, you don't just want to just nip down to your local supermarket and just get any old thing, but then maybe make it a whole process where that whole anticipation of what this meal is, this meal that you're going to try, and then you've got all the ingredients. Then, of course, it's like, okay, in my house, you peel the onions to the husband, but then It can be right, who's going to do what, or how are we going to do it, or let's just get in there and do it together and see what happens. And then it's that enjoyment afterwards. So it's a whole process, and it's not just one process that you sit down, look at the recipes, and then it's done. It can take a week or even 2 weeks with this process, because you're finding the recipe or what you want to do. You pick a day maybe when you want to do it, on a Saturday or Sunday when you're not stressed from work and you've got the time, and then you make a time to go shopping. And if you're going to a farmer's market, if you're anything like me, it's not just straight to the veggie store. You're looking at other things. You might stop for a coffee. It almost becomes a separate date in a way, just to go and get your ingredients. And then, of course, you're getting your ingredients. So there's so much that one can take from one meal, essentially. And this, I think, is so important, because we are, especially since the pandemic, where we've had that forced separation, and even 4 or 5 years afterwards, there's still this dissonance of trying to reconnect. There's still so much loneliness and these habits, as you said, of just picking up your phone and looking at stuff and not actually being with the people that you're with, but also having to almost rebuild relationships because you've been apart for so long and maybe not connected in the same way that you did before. So I think this is such an amazing thing that you're doing. And I mean, for me, food is a massive thing. I mean, yes, I'm a foodie, but I'm very much about where does the food come from. So it goes beyond even that, because it's where's the food? Are the animals grass fed? Is it the local farmer who doesn't spray, providing the vegetables? Where am I going to go? So there's so much more in it for me personally, in finding the ingredients for the food, and then of course is creating the food. But one thing I do enjoy is that you can't get cooking wrong, can you? You can, because you can just add ingredients. It might not taste the way you think it will taste, but you can't, I don't know, you can't get it. Maybe I've just been lucky, so bad in some ways. Maybe you can, but generally you can play around with it.
Definitely. And you can rescue something that has gone a little bit wrong too. I think Leica hit the nail on the head though when she said that, you know, because we spend a lot of time together doesn't mean that we're connecting, you know, and especially people who have now started working from home, you take so much for granted. But for me, if I say to Billy, I need to go to the grocery store today, like on a weekend, he'll go, okay, what time do you want to go? And we always go together and we make an outing out of it, right? It's like, you want to have a treat while we're out. Like you said, we have a coffee, and it just becomes more than just the creating of the meal and more than just the habit of shopping or doing things together. And I really encourage people, as like you said, one of the first steps is talking about meals and planning meals together, because I think that traditionally with a lot of couples, one person cooks and the other person shows up, and you know, whatever's on the table is what they get that night. But wouldn't it be more fun if both had input, right? And you discussed that more and take that out of the mundane chore that you have to do at the beginning of the week, and make it into something that's, you know, another conversation that you've created. Hey, what are we going to do for dinner this week? Well, I haven't had that for a while. Do you want to have that? Well, actually, I don't like that. So let's not, you know, you can find out more when you open that conversation up. There's so much more to be shared and had.
And you said it nicely that there is more to be found out. And I'm really thinking that, you know, there will be something slightly different that we can learn from this if we're just kind of starting out in a committed relationship, when we're maybe moving in or we're getting serious, we're sleeping over, but we're maybe not yet in, you know, 10, 20, 30 years worth of marriage.
Right.
And at the same time, I can imagine that it's a very different kind of a lesson when someone of 20, 30 years marriage or committed relationship partnership comes in to reignite the fire maybe, or to, as we kind of touched on at the beginning, maybe use it as a bit of a therapy. So what would be the lessons, or what would be some of the tips and insights you would have for both the starting couples who, you know, maybe it's easier for them to get it right from the beginning, what they can start doing now, and obviously what then we can advise to the couples that have been together for a while and maybe need this little bit of a push to try something else to really get their relationship in a better path.
Well, to the younger couples, I think it's a great habit to get into, cooking together and interacting over your food and your meals. And I think that it's, like you said, it's a little bit easier for them to start out because things are new. And I really have worked a lot with sort of targeting people who are married or together for 10 years or less. Not that I don't work with long-term relationships more as well, but I think it's easier for the people who have been together for a shorter period of time if you have chosen this person to spend your life with. And that's the important part, right? You have chosen to spend your life with this person. Make sure you keep that connection fresh. So, you know, plan your meals together, cook your meals together. Don't always go out to a movie or a restaurant for a date night, because although they're enjoyable, they're more sterile, right? You're in a restaurant with 100 other people. It's not very intimate. Or you're in a movie, you're not talking in a movie, right? So make it more intimate right from the beginning and start bringing food into it. And for the couples who have been together for 20 or 30 years, their dynamic is different. A lot of times they've become empty nesters, and the kids are gone and they're looking at each other going, well, what now? And this also brings in something that I'm really very passionate about. I have 3 kids. I love my kids till the ends of the earth. But a happy parent is a better parent. So if you're always saying, oh, I'm not going to worry about my relationship, I'll connect with them when the kids are older, and you focus entirely on your kids, you're not being the best parent, because you don't have that adult time to relax and feel supported and feel loved. So it's really important at any stage to connect with your partner, to keep that fire and that flame and that passion alive. But when you get to 20 or 30 years and you haven't done that, then you're sort of at a point where you need to get to know your partner a little bit better. And maybe by that time you've created almost separate lives from each other, right? You've got all your activities and he's got all his activities, and you're never together. And I think that that's existing in a decent relationship, but that's not thriving in a happy relationship. So if you're at that point where you have put your relationship on the back burner and sort of pursued different directions, I think there's a lot of benefit to saying, okay, let's try something new that will connect us. And chances are you know a lot about that person, but if you haven't cooked together, then that's a new experience that you can share and enjoy together, and get that spark of, excitement and the teamwork back again, and feel those feelings again that you felt in the very beginning. So I think that there's cooking together. It's never too late to start, but it's great if you can start when you're sort of in the younger stages of a relationship.
And I'm so glad that you brought in the kids, because myself and Natalie, we don't have kids. But I think it's also great to do both things. When you have kids, to make sure that you have time away from the kids to connect with your partner. But I can see that this kind of an activity is not just relationship, like romantic between partners. Bringing food into the family unit with the kids, teaching them, showing them, involving them in the process of food, and as Natalie touched on, maybe where the food comes from or how to cook this. Like, I am really grateful for my mom teaching me very early on lots of things about cooking, and having that kind of a relationship with her and then with my family. And I think this is something also that today lots of young kids and young adults are so detached from where the food comes from, and where lemons come from, and where sheep and pig and cow meat, actually what happens with that. So I'm so glad that you kind of mentioned it. Is there something that you would then recommend slightly differently to families who would want to involve their kids in these things? Is it purely for them to work on their romantic relationship and leave the kids outside of this? Or do you have some activities, or do you work with couples who want to actually bring in the kids in there and have it more as a kind of family connection activity?
Well, I firmly believe that food appreciation and food knowledge is a life skill for children. And as I'm sure you can imagine, my kids, all 3 of them cook, and they're all good in the kitchen, and they have very different cooking skills and preferences, techniques, or whatever. But I think that when you definitely can bring your children into the kitchen to cook with you, because you're really setting a tremendous example for them for the rest of their lives. And I know for my kids, I mean, kids go through stages, right? And their dad is a picky eater. So when we were together, their food preferences were so different than when we were apart, because I would make something unusual and he would go, oh, I don't like that. And the kids would go, we don't like that either, right? And so if you can teach your child to appreciate different foods and to try different foods, then when they as they get older and they're on their own, they're not going to somebody's house like their boyfriend's parents' house or whatever and going, oh, I don't like that. How am I going to eat that? Right? They learn to just eat what's in front of them and appreciate so many different things. And also, the cooking skills, teaching them cooking skills, even basic ones, is such an asset for when they get older. And I think that there was a few years ago where there was really a trend with young people doing everything takeout and everything at restaurants. And I think it's starting to swing back now where people are wanting to create their own food again. And they are, like you said, much more aware of sustainability and organics and where things come from. And I think when you teach your children this from an early age, first of all, it becomes second nature. But second of all, it really is a skill that they will carry with them throughout their lives and an amazing memory. I mean, I remember cooking with my mom. My mom was amazing in the kitchen. She was the one who developed my foodie tendencies. My dad was really into food too, but I remember these. These are our cherished moments that you can have with your children and with your partner. And I always say, at the end of days, when you look back in your life, you're never going to look back and say, I wish I'd made $10,000 more, or I wish I'd taken another meeting. You're going to say, I wish I'd spent more time with my loved ones. And by taking food preparation, which is a necessity of life, and combining that with time with your partner or your children, you're getting huge benefit, and you don't even have to find the extra time to do it because you're going to be doing it anyways.
You've talked a lot about, food and cooking a meal, but cooking is also the baking. I mean, baking can be so important, especially if you love, yummy cookies or nice birthday cakes or just cakes. And my mother's not a cook, and cooking was never a thing. I just learned how to cook because I had to learn how to cook. And, my mother just did very basic stuff. It was, as you said, you cook because you got to feed the kids. So you just cook something simple. She's a single parent, full-time job, and cooking is not her thing at all. But my sister, she's much older than me, and things that I remember from my sister is going to stay with her. And the first thing she did is teach me how to bake. Started with, the box cakes that you get. And I mean, so far back, I was like really young. And she taught me to bake. And every time I visit her, there was always this baking. So I'd go to Kath to bake. And it became such a routine. And it's through her that I've learned how to bake and then learned how to cook, because she just by teaching me of, mixing the flour, different ways of mixing flour and pouring in the liquid slowly and, whisking it. And it's not just everything at once. There's a way of doing it. And I know that baking is a bit more set than just cooking a meal. But it's things like that, 30, 40 years later, I can still vividly remember standing in her kitchen. I can even describe her kitchen to you. And, learning to bake these cakes and then having fun icing them. And it became such a process that I just love visiting my sister to have the cakes, and then her kids would eat the cake. And then it was like critique time. And normally they always enjoyed them because they just shoved it in their mouth. But the thing is, it just had such fond memories for me. And if you do have kids, I mean, just teaching them to bake or baking with them, they gingerbread biscuits for, I think it's Thanksgiving, or, you can biscuits to take to school or something, really simple biscuits. You can ice them, you can make them into really fancy shapes, and you can start with the box cakes. I mean, I don't like them, but they're a great way to start. And that's how I learned, was starting. And then it was, right, now that you've done a few box cakes, shall we do it the grown-up way? Pick a cake, let's do it. And I got to choose. And it's my childhood, visiting my sister every once a year or twice a year, is this cake process of learning how to cook. And I just think, imagine growing up in a house where you can cook, where you learn to bake, where you're doing something. I mean, both of you have mentioned, there's experiences with your mothers. And I'm like, wow, little green, jealousy is coming out there. But the thing is, it brings you together with your family, with your parents, and you might share those secrets. You might say whether you're having difficulty at school or what you're struggling with, because there's that more openness. There's that space to share. And I think as you're baking and you busy whisking something, you'll be more open then as, how was your day? Fine. Okay. Have you done your homework? Yes or no? Go do your homework. Shush, be quiet. I'm busy. It takes that away. Whereas then, and I think as a parent as well, to really learn about what your kids are going through, what are they dealing with at school? What's happening in their lives? Who are their friends? Who aren't they talking to? Who have they had a falling out? What's the gossip going on at school? And I think that's a beautiful place to really build those strong connections. And I really think that through my experiences of baking with my sister has given me a really unique relationship with her, because she's 20 years older than me. I mean, what would I have in common with her? Nothing.
Right.
But it's just through her, just taking me under her wing and having those baking experiences. 40 years later, there's still that special connection. So I love how you are really bringing this in. And I think it's great as partners and rekindling relationships. But I also think as a parent, it's a great way to build that special connection with your child. And it doesn't matter if it's a boy or a girl. I think it's great if boys can cook. It's like wonderful if a boy knows his way around the kitchen, because they'll make fantastic husbands or partners, because they can take on some of the cooking experience. So it's not a girl's thing. It's a human thing. I think it's
Right.
it's a relationship. It's bring your family together. And I see people who like, well, I'm the mother, I'm the wife, I'll cook. And I'm like, but you've got teenage kids. Do they know how to cook? No, they don't need to know how to cook. Well, yeah, they do need to cook. They seriously do need to learn how to cook. As you said, it's a life skill. But not just that, it's how many opportunities are lost through you not bringing your kids into the kitchen. And I don't think at 15 and 16, it's a good age to maybe start, because by that time it's like, nope, no, I don't want to, whereas it's younger, it's part of the routine, it's part of what you do. And I think then it'd be nice to really do things and then have them even cook the meal, so that you and your partner can sit back in the lounge with a lovely glass of wine as the kids are cooking.
Exactly. Well, it's funny because both of my girls like to cook, and they're 21 and 25, and they're out doing their own thing at university or traveling or whatever. And they'll say to me, "Hey, Mom, I think it'd be fun if I came over and we baked this together." And I'm always happy to say 100%, but I've caught on now, because I'll say, "Are we baking it together, or am I just going to bake it and you're going to watch me?" And they go, "Well, you're going to do the cooking. I'm just going to watch." But they're sitting at the counter with me while I'm doing it. And they're, in that age where I think they look back and they want mom to take care of them, right? So that's why they participate less, but they also do it on their own. So I know they've learned something. But it's true, you're in the kitchen, whether they're just watching me or they're helping alongside. There's activity. So it's not like in the car. In the car, I have them prisoner, so I can ask them the questions and they may not necessarily answer me, but it's not the same welcoming environment as being in the kitchen cooking. And anything you bake, like you said, I mean, I do tons of baking and I always have. Baking takes a few minutes. There's literally nothing you can bake in 10 minutes. So when you're baking with your child, you've got that, hour and a half or whatever, that they are there with you, and conversation will flow. I mean, I have never been in a situation where we didn't have a lot of conversation while we're doing this. And it's the ease of conversation. You like you said, how did school go this week? Did you talk to that girl? Were you having a problem? Did you get your grade back on this? But there's just so many opportunities. And when you're you're baking together or cooking together in the kitchen, it just seems like a less threatening environment to start these conversations and have them. So you're right. It's a great, great way to connect with your kids or your partner. And baking is something that's a little bit different on a different level because it's chemistry more. So you have to focus on what you're doing, and it's not as playful. It's a little more serious, but it's still, it generally takes longer. So you have more of an opportunity to connect.
As you were talking, kind of my mind went back to kind of the couples and the relationships. And I know we were talking about, planning it together, but there is something in me that every now and then likes a good challenge. And sometimes I think it's great to really put yourself out of the comfort zone and be like, we're only going to cook from, what we have at home already and try to be innovative. Or maybe we will just, throw the darts and let the Google suggest, or these days we have all the AI, and we'll just ask the AI to give us a random recipe with a shopping list, and we're going to do that. And I think it's a great, we can have cooking on the regular basis, and we can really do that more as a regular thing on not necessarily daily, but weekly basis. But I think sometimes it might be really nice, because even with this intention, I can imagine that over time we will get into a routine. We will get into, we like these recipes, we like these shops, we like these things. And I think sometimes it's really nice just to throw a spin ball in there, be like, you know what? We're just going to pull a random recipe, obviously allergies aside, of course, never do anything that you're not allowed to eat.
Right.
But just be challenged in a way, challenge yourself or challenge each other. Do something like, I will pick a recipe for you and you will pick a recipe for me, and we will cook together, but each on our own thing. And then obviously we will share and we still have the time together. Do you have any little exercises like this that could maybe be a bit challenging for people that you could just share with us?
Well, one thing I encourage people to do, one of the steps is to, like you said, get out of your comfort zone and make something that you wouldn't normally make. So pick something from a different culture, different cuisine, and say, okay, let's find a recipe to cook from Thailand or whatever. I mean, there's so many different cultures and different food personalities. So I really think it is important to get out of your comfort zone a little bit, because we sort of get in this tunnel vision that we only eat certain things. And I think that it can be a wonderful learning experience. But again, it's like going to a museum or a zoo. When you're trying a different cuisine, it's not just creating a recipe, but it's flavors that you've never experienced before, and you're learning maybe a new technique that you've never had, and maybe it's not your favorite. But when you make these experiments and you choose something different, then you can really be rewarded with some new appreciation for something different. And I think that that's using a different culture, selecting a different culture and selecting a recipe is a great way to sort of step off that path and say, we're going to try something completely new today. Because you can say, we have, veal parmigiana and we have risotto and we do this, but this week we're going to make pasta with olives on it. That's not different enough, right? You want to switch it up completely and pick something from a different culture that you haven't experienced before. And there's so many different cultures. Like when I was in Chile, they're a Spanish-based culture, I guess, you'd say, but their food was so different than anything I've experienced in terms of Spanish or Mexican or whatever. And so I found it really, really interesting. They were hugely seafood based and a lot of ceviches and stuff like that. And so, I found something new that I hadn't expected, and it was a really interesting learning experience. And I think that people can do that. They can pick almost any country and Google recipes for that country and find something new that they had not experienced before, which is always interesting. If not delicious, if not to your palate, it's still interesting to have made the effort to do it.
And I think it's not only applicable for us at home, but as you mentioned, like travels, then it could be so great to enhance your travels. Because again, in travels, we can often end up in, like, we go to Italy, we're going to go to Italian place, we're going to have some pizza, we're going to have some pasta, but then go and maybe find some course and learn how to make, homemade pasta, that some skills that not only you have memories of great food while you were traveling, but also that some skills that you can bring back home. And every time you cook something together back home, you will be taken back. So really expanding on those memories.
Definitely. There's always places where you can take courses or do, excuse me, a tour of a market or anything like that, and learning about the culture. I travel a lot, and when I travel, I very much like to travel like a local, and I avoid the touristy places, and I never go to the fast food places. I'm happiest when I find a little tiny bistro that has, regional cuisine. And I think that that's a great way to expand that memory and to preserve it, is to learn a little bit about their food and be able to replicate it when you come home, to take you back to that moment, like you said.
I'm going to ask you now the $1 million question, because we have talked about baking, we've talked about cooking. Who gets to do the dishes afterwards?
Well, I'll be honest with you, it's mostly me. And the reason is because my partner has a very stressful job. He's a project manager at a construction company. And like so many companies these days, they want more from you and they treat you worse. And he's so stressed out when he comes home at the end of the day that I choose not to say, it's your turn to clean the kitchen. I just kind of clean it up and I stick everything in the dishwasher. And I mean, he's happy to help. And he tells me, I like helping because it takes my mind off of work and allows me to relax. But me being the doer giver person, I feel badly asking him. So when we do a big dinner, like a Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner, it's both of us cleaning up. And he's there to help me every step of the way. But for the day-to-day things, it's usually me who cleans up.
Well, in my household, I'm very privileged or lucky, is my husband does all the dishes. So mostly I do the odd dish, and I do some of the dishes, but he's more impatient. So he'll do them quicker than I would do them. So maybe that's why it gets done. But it's always interesting to know who does the dishes, because I know some people, I cooked, you do the dishes. Some people, as you said, it's a shared thing. So it's always interesting is who does the dishes, because as much as baking is great and cooking, there's always dishes. There's always
so
dishes.
many. Yeah. And so, he would clean. And I have always been I'm cooking, you clean up type of person. But he's, I don't know, I like to take care of him, so I do. And I save him the effort of the dishes.
And I love it. I love it. And I mean, we can talk about food. Well, food is something I'm really passionate about, and all that, and how we can develop it. But we have this section that goes into our Patreon account, and this is all about those final thoughts, those last top tips, or something that we've not maybe asked you, but this is that space for what we call the gold nugget. Hop onto our Patreon account to get access to this amazing gold nugget. And again, thank yous, for sharing your time, sharing your expertise and your energy with us today. But now, if somebody's listening to this and they're thinking, I need more, I need to find out more, I need to be in the circle and get some ideas, where can people find you?
I always tell people the best place to find me is just on my Facebook profile, because that way you can see a little bit about who I am, and there's links there to what I do, but it's just my personal profile. So I think it allows people to have a little glimpse into my life and who I am, and decide if I'm someone that they might want to, work with or get to know a little bit better. So just my Facebook profile, which is my name, Krista, Krista Melanson, Melanson, and pop into my profile and reach out to me from there if you'd like to know more. I'm always happy to talk to people, especially about food.
Thank you for that. And we will have all your links in our description in our notes, so people can click on the links. And again, thank you so much for sharing your time, sharing your space, sharing your energy with us today. I mean, food is, who doesn't love food, and talking about food. So thank you so much. And for our listeners, what have you got from today? Are you starting to think, oh, let me start to enjoy cooking and not just cook for cooking's sake, because you've got to eat, you've got to feed the family. Maybe if cooking is too much for you, have you thought about maybe just bringing in baking and starting to do that with your family, with your kids, with your parents, with your partner? You know, what inspires you from today? Is there dishes that you would like to try from a different culture? Or is it just maybe starting to think about once or twice a month, bringing in the whole family to cook a meal together and to enjoy that meal together? What is your journey on food? Is this something that you do regularly anyway? Or is this something that you're thinking, oh, that might be a good idea. Let me see how I can bring food as part of building my relationship? We would love to know your thoughts on that and your journey with food and what you're bringing into your life and what experiences you've had with cooking and baking and building relationships. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.